When Deku's new armor first debuted in the late summer of 2024, many fans even now have been curious at what the Armored Hero suit can do. I myself have once created an analysis video sometime after the series ended, focused entirely on the possible functionalities of Deku's new armor, as well as a bit of how it could have made him into a great hero again despite being quirkless. And for the most part, I'm somewhat satisfied at how it turned out, considering the lack of to no info we were given about the armor during that time. But it was mostly just baseless assumptions, and I feel like it could have been better. Thankfully, through Horikoshi's continuous effort to supporting this series even after it ended, we were able to get a little bit more info about the armor. It's not very much, but the ones we got so far are more than enough to help us further understand what the armor can do, as well as what Deku can do with it. So, using whatever additional info that we currently got, I decided to make another analysis video about the armor's possible functionalities, but this time how it could make Deku stronger. With all that being said, welcome to Animanko 9000, a channel where we talk about content related to anime, manga, and other types of media. And in this video, I'll be giving you wider and updated details of what else the Deku armor is possibly capable of, and how much stronger the hero is with it. Also, if you want to hear more of the contents I mentioned earlier, just subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. So first things first, let's have a quick overview of what we already know about the armor. For starters, it has been confirmed that said armor was created by both Melissa Shield and Mei Hatsume. Not that surprising since some of the armor's design look like Hatsume's work, and Melissa was the one who created the Armored All Might, which Deku's armor was based off of. Additionally, we also know that all of Class 1A had some involvement in the armor's development process, either through some form of funding, or maybe testing out some of the armor's capabilities. The last one is a bit hard to say, but besides their hero work, it could explain why Deku hasn't been able to contact his former classmates for 8 years. Nevertheless, once the Armored Hero suit was ready for field work, they gave it to Deku as a gift, and upon wearing said armor, not only was the former MC able to return to being a hero, but also became a powerful one, which is very apparent since he is currently Japan's number 4 hero. Now, how precisely strong Deku is while wearing the armor is never clarified, and it doesn't help that whenever Deku appears with it, we only get glimpses of it. Not to mention, his current ranking doesn't necessarily mean his overall strength, as there are other factors of how one will attain their hero rank. That being said, given how the new armor was built using data obtained during the final battle between All Might and All For One, we can come to the possible conclusion that Deku's armor is just as or even more powerful than the Armored All Might. And it was strong enough to allow the retired hero to hold his own and deal in some good damage against his hated nemesis, despite practically being a prototype. As such, it is probably no exaggeration to say that the new armor must have made Deku stronger than many of the existing heroes who are still active. Of course, whether that also makes him the strongest hero is kinda up for debate, but chances are he just might be, and it can be somewhat backed up when Horikoshi himself gave out this statement that the armor can replicate the various abilities of One For All. Now, for the most part, Horikoshi seems to just be referring to the abilities that once belonged to the previous One For All holders. However, there's no reason to not also include the quirk standard ability to stockpile enormous amounts of raw power and significantly enhance the user's physical stats. I mean, at the very least, the gauntlets and boots of the armor should be able to increase Deku's strength, speed, and agility, allowing him to throw powerful punches and kicks, run incredibly fast, and travel across various terrains and obstacles by jumping and leaping around them respectively. At the same time, Horikoshi also stated how the armor tries to copy the One For All abilities, which could suggest that the armor may have certain limitations and is unable to produce the exact same power of the quirk, like its 100% output. Nevertheless, I don't think that's going to be an issue, because during the rebuilding process of Japan, we see Deku, without using the last embers of One For All, effortlessly bulldozing a large amount of debris in the area, showing just how strong he is when compared to most of the average heroes. Plus, assuming that Deku hasn't stopped training during the 8-year time skip, and still in peak combat condition, he could potentially be around Knuckle Duster's level of strength, and that character was strong enough to knock out a villain whose quirk is all about boosting one's power. So, even if the armor isn't like One For All, as long as it can at least maybe help multiply Deku's strength and his other physical abilities to about 45% of One For All's powers, then it should be enough to make up for the hero's lack of a quirk. Especially if he uses the support gear items that mimic the abilities of the previous One For All holders' quirks. Granted, we have yet to fully know what kind of support gear items that could allow Deku to utilize the previous One For All holders' abilities, but we can get some idea by first looking how the armor tries to copy Black Whip. In this case, for Deku to be able to grab onto objects, capture enemies, and swing around buildings like a certain web slinger, Horikoshi stated that the armor can mimic those capabilities by using cable extensions, much like what the Armored All Might used against All for One. The only difference between this and the quirk's energy tendrils is that the former won't be as elastic. So that means Deku can't launch himself like a slingshot unless he can quickly reel in the cables after firing them. Still, if the former MC can also conduct electricity through the cables he fired out with Black Whip, then it should give him more advantages, such as how Deku could further reinforce his arms by wrapping the cables around them and turning them into an extra pair of makeshift gauntlets or braces. Also, if the electricity doesn't affect Deku's armor that much, then he could also shock his enemies when he hits them. It's not impossible, and I can see the former MC being creative enough to come up with such a technique, like his overlay form. Well, whether it's possible or not, let's move on to the next ability, which happens to be Float. And while Horikoshi didn't mention anything at how this quirk's ability can be copied by the armor, it might have been revealed within a special one-shot chapter that was released alongside the final data book. As such, within said chapter, it contains a single scene where we not only see Deku using the armor's version of Black Whip, but also its version of Float. From what we can tell, in order to copy the quirk's ability to levitate oneself in the air, or just simply keeping him from touching the ground, the armor helps Deku do that by using jet thrusters attached to his legs. However, unlike the quirk itself, we can probably assume that the armor's version grants Deku more speed and mobility, kinda like the Urivity and Genium support items that All Might used. Moreover, as an extra bonus, it could even complement well with Deku's signature shot style, further increasing his powerful kicks, just like how Ida uses his quirk to increase his kicks for combat. So, using these two as some sort of reference for the other functions of the armor, we should get a better picture of how it can copy the other abilities. For instance, Smokescreen, which frankly is the easiest one to copy, and it can be done in two ways. One is that Deku can simply just release a large amount of smoke through any parts of the armor, and the other is taking a page from Bakugo's support gear item, which is to create and throw an improvised smoke grenade. Though I think I prefer the latter, and it's still just as useful to help Deku confuse or hide from his enemies. Now for an ability like Danger Sense, that will be the most difficult to copy, especially how the armor can allow Deku to detect incoming threats. But I can probably imagine the armor having a built-in visor, providing Deku a similar feat that lets him know where an attack is coming from, or maybe something like the Arkhamverse Batman's detective mode, where he uses a device that allows him to see people through solid walls and give him a wider view of the area he is at. I realize the second one is a bit more like the quirk search, but it will still allow Deku to see incoming threats from any direction. Granted, it sounds a bit advanced, but if technology in the My Hero verse is evolving to the point that it can compete against quirks, then it is doable. Much like this function that could possibly copy the next ability, Fa-Chin, and for this one, I initially had this idea where in order for Deku to build up the kinetic energy, the armor would somehow absorb the impact of every attack it has received. That way, not only is it allowing Deku to gain more power, but it's also helping him to reduce an enemy's attack. However, later on, I realized it wouldn't be too practical, as Deku would still be taking damage, and it would only just slow down the armor's eventual breakdown. But taking in some inspiration from Sam Wilson's vibranium wings from the movie Captain America Brave New World, the idea could still apply. Yet, instead of wings to block and absorb the attacks, Deku's nanomachine cape will be the one doing that. Almost no different to the Armored All Might's mechanical cape, which helped the retired hero block All for One's attack. Also, just like Sam Wilson's vibranium wings, once the cape absorbed and built up enough energy, Deku could just as well release a quick burst of it altogether. Small difference is that I could also see Deku potentially being able to transfer the energy to his arms and legs, and using some of the Sugarman function that All Might use to increase his kicks, Deku could use that energy to accelerate his punches or kicks for heavier impact, further imitating Fa-Chin almost perfectly, but you know, that's just my thoughts. In any case, the last ability to go is Gear Shift, and while the quirk's ability to further increase the holder's speed should be easy to copy, with one idea being that the armor could surround the wearer a small magnetic field to reduce any form of friction and allow them to propel themselves, I didn't know how it would allow Deku to control the acceleration of said speed. That is until I noticed the armor carrying knives on its side, and in addition to assuming that Deku might have become proficient with this set of weapon, it could also possibly act as an armor's gear shift, much like a real car's gear shift, which could allow Deku to control his speed, accelerating and decelerating at any moment. I mean, I'm honestly not sure about that one, but it would fit within the original quirk's power. Well, regardless of how I could copy the ability, any of these possible functions within the armor could make Deku feel like he never lost one for all, and maybe allow him to do more. In fact, within the last portion of Horikoshi's statement, he goes on to explain that the former MC could also combine the armor's various abilities. And going back to that scene in that special one-shot chapter, we can see Deku using the armored version of both Black Whip and possibly Float, giving him pseudo-flight, as well as further increasing his mobility in the air, just like in his fight against Lady Nagant. So, using those two together as another form of reference, if Deku were to combine the armor's version of Smokescreen and Danger Sense, he would become an even more tricky opponent to deal with, because with those two, the former MC could both hide from and locate the enemy, and quickly take them out before they could notice anything. Same thing if he were to combine Fa-Chin and Gear Shift, as both will allow Deku to perform his ultimate technique Overdrive, well, a different and probably less powerful of the original technique, but should still be able to give any villain trouble. Frankly, if Deku can't do all of this, he could make it to number 1. Plus, the best part about this is that the armor is still just a prototype as well, meaning it could get an upgrade, or Deku could get a much powerful version of the armor. You know, like how Tony Stark has different yet powerful variations of the Iron Man suit. If that's the case, then eventually the armor could be on par with One for All. But until we get some sort of sequel of this series, it's going to be hard to say, but here's hoping it could happen if only to see Deku showcasing more of the armor. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video, hope you enjoyed this one. By the way, sometime this coming week, I'll be doing an analysis video of Deku vs Miles Morales for the upcoming Death Battle episode, so if you want to see that among others, just like and subscribe. Also, if you have any other ideas of what the armor can do, just leave a comment down below, and thanks for watching.